My name is Linda, and for most of my life, I believe that if you gave everything to your family, your time, your love, your money, they would be there for you when it mattered most. I truly believe that. I built my life around it. I'm 38 now, and I've worked as a critical care nurse in Columbus, Ohio, for over a decade. It's not glamorous, but I've always been proud of what I do. I come home exhausted, smelling like antiseptic and stress. But I know I'm helping people. At least, I used to think that was enough. My husband Kevin was the heart of our home. He was a civil engineer, quiet and kind, the sort of man who brewed coffee for me before dawn and hummed old songs while flipping pancakes on Sunday mornings. He wasn't flashy, but everything he did with love. He called me Lindy, even when we fought, especially when we fought. We met at a blood drive in college, both of us donating on the same day. He joked that I gave more blood than he did and owed him dinner. I laughed, and I think that was it. The beginning of everything. Our wedding was small, but meaningful. We said our vows under a canopy of autumn leaves in a local park. Just the two of us and a few close friends. Our daughter Clara came 6 years ago. After 2 heartbreaking miscarriages, when she was born, Kevin cried harder than I'd ever seen. We learned a few weeks later that she had severe environmental allergies, dust, pollen, mold, things you couldn't always see. But that could make her body flare up in hives or shut down in hours. It meant air purifiers in every room, hypoallergenic everything, and constant vigilance. It wasn't easy, but Kevin made it feel like we could handle anything. Even with all the challenges, our home felt full, not perfect, but full of warmth. Kevin would come home from work. Clara would run into his arms, and I would watch them from the doorway with a quiet sort of gratitude. On weekends, we'd go to the botanical garden early in the morning, when there were fewer allergens, and Clara would ride on Kevin's shoulders while I took blurry pictures of them. Always too slow to capture the moment but trying anyway. We didn't have much money, but we had rhythm, trust, laughter, and I truly thought, that when life inevitably brought its storms, my family, the people I'd spent years supporting, would be there to help hold the umbrella. My mother, Teresa, lives only 30 minutes away. My older sister Mariella is a local TV host. She does weather segments and community stories. And people in town adore her. She always had the big smile, the shiny hair, the voice that turned heads. And then there's Alex, my younger brother, the golden boy who studied business, quit after a year, and still somehow gets treated like he's the future of the family. Growing up, I was the one in the middle. The invisible one, the dependable one. I was the one who took the bus to my clinical rotations while Mariella was praised for landing a high school modeling gig. I was the one who sat quietly at the kitchen table while Alex got extra helpings and laughter and my mother's hand on his shoulder. I never said anything. I didn't want to stir trouble. I just tried to be good. Even as an adult, I kept giving. When Alex defaulted on a loan, I helped pay it off. When mom's heating went out in the winter, I wired her money. When Mariella's daughter needed help with tuition, I didn't hesitate. I told myself, this is what families do. They help each other. One day, when I need them, they'll be there for me too. Kevin knew how it was. He never pushed, never complained, but sometimes when I got off the phone with my mom, tense, quiet, depleted, he'd put his arms around me and whisper, "You don't owe them your soul, Lindy." But I wasn't ready to believe that yet. I still thought I could earn their love. Looking back now, I can see how naive that was. How deeply I misunderstood the kind of loyalty some people are capable of. Because the moment life pushed me to the ground, when I needed my family more than ever before, they didn't just look away. They laughed. They left. They chose sunshine over sorrow. And that's when everything changed. For years, I convinced myself that my family's indifference wasn't intentional. That maybe I was just imagining things, reading too much into moments that weren't meant to hurt. But the truth was, the signs had always been there. I had just refused to see them. I used to think my mother loved us all equally. But love shouldn't feel like being measured and found lacking. Growing up, it was always about Mariella, the shining star, the golden child. My mother beamed whenever Mariella walked into a room. clapped the loudest at her school performances, and made sure she had the best of everything. Even after she became a local TV host, my mother spoke about her as if she were royalty. Alex, the baby of the family, was different. He didn't need to do much to earn attention. My mother doted on him effortlessly, the way she never did with me. Even when he dropped out of business school and bounced from job to job, she excused it all. He's still finding himself, she'd say. He just needs some time. Meanwhile, I worked my way through nursing school, studying at the kitchen table while they watched TV together. No one asked how I was doing. No one praised me when I graduated or when I got my first job in the ICU. I was expected to be fine on my own. Reliable Linda, dependable Linda, always okay, even when she wasn't. It took me years to realize that in my mother's eyes, I was less of a daughter and more of a resource. I was the one who stepped in whenever there was a financial crisis. The one who offered help without being asked. I told myself I was doing it because I wanted to. Because I loved them. But deep down, I think I was hoping for something in return. Recognition, warmth, some sign that I belonged. Kevin saw it. He never tried to make me see things his way. But he knew. I remember one Christmas when we hosted dinner at our house. Clara had just turned 4. And Kevin and I had spent weeks preparing, decorating the house, making special dishes, wrapping presents. My mother arrived with Mariella and Alex, arms full of gifts for my niece and nephew. Not for Clara. I watched as my daughter clapped her hands, excited to see them, only to sit quietly when she realized she had been forgotten. Kevin leaned in and whispered to me, "Do you see it now?" I did, but I still wasn't ready to accept it. I held on to the belief that they were just careless, not cruel, that they loved me, even if they didn't show it the way I wished they would. And so, I kept giving. When Mariella needed money for her daughter's summer camp, I sent a check. When Alex lost his job again and couldn't cover his rent, I helped. When my mother's heater broke in the middle of winter, I wired her money immediately. Even though Kevin and I were struggling to pay our own bills, I told myself that one day, when I needed them, they would do the same for me. Then Kevin died, and I learned the truth. When I called my mother to tell her, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. My heart was pounding, grief swelling so large in my chest that I felt like I couldn't breathe. She picked up on the third ring. "Mom," I started, my voice already breaking. "Kevin's gone. There was an accident. A snowstorm, his car, he didn't make it." There was a pause. A long, hollow pause. Then she sighed. "Oh, that's unfortunate." I thought maybe I misheard her. I swallowed hard, tried to steady myself. "The funeral will be next Sunday." I said. "Can you come?" There was another pause. "Oh, Linda," she said, her voice suddenly lighter. "Next Sunday? That's tricky. You know Mariella just had a breakup, right? And she's been under so much stress at work. Brian and I already booked a trip to Florida to cheer her up." My stomach turned. What? The tickets were expensive," she continued, like she hadn't just shattered me in half. "And we could really use some sun. You understand, don't you? Besides, you're strong. Linda, you don't need us there. You never do." I stood frozen in my kitchen, the weight of her words pressing down on me, heavier than my grief, heavier than the loss of my husband. "You don't need us there. You never do." Mariella, her grown daughter, was heartbroken over a breakup. I had just lost my husband. But in my mother's eyes, only one of us deserved comfort. I don't remember hanging up. I just remember the sound of Clara playing with her stuffed animals in the other room, completely unaware that the world had just shifted beneath us. I was alone. Kevin was gone. And my family, the people I had sacrificed for, the ones I had always put first, had chosen to leave me in my darkest moment. Not out of cruelty, not out of malice, but because I had never been important to them in the first place. The funeral was held on a gray, bitterly cold Sunday. Snowflakes drifted down from the overcast sky, melting as they touched the dark fabric of my coat. The cemetery was quiet except for the hushed murmurs of those who had come, Kevin's colleagues, his childhood friends, our neighbors, and a few nurses from my unit who knew what he meant to me. But my family wasn't there. I stood at the gravesite, gripping Clara's small gloved hand as the priest spoke in a solemn tone. I barely heard the words. My mind was too full of the deafening silence left behind by the people who should have been here. Kevin had been a good man. A wonderful husband. A father who had loved our daughter more than anything. And yet, to my own mother and siblings, his passing wasn't worth the inconvenience of changing their plans. As the final words were spoken, Clara turned to me with her big, confused eyes. "Where's Grandma?" she asked. I couldn't answer. The lump in my throat was too thick. The pain too sharp. Instead, I knelt down and smoothed her hair, brushing away the tiny snowflakes that had settled in her curls. "It's just us, baby," I whispered. "It's just us." After the service, I went home feeling emptier than I ever had in my life. I sat in the living room in the dark, staring at the framed photo of Kevin and Clara on the fireplace mantel. While Clara napped upstairs, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a social media notification. Mariella had just posted a picture from the beach in Florida. She was lounging in a chair, wearing oversized sunglasses, sipping something bright and fruity from a glass. The caption read, "Sunshine is all I need." I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. My fingers gripped the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. They weren't just absent. They weren't just indifferent. They were celebrating. While I was burying my husband in the frozen ground. While I was holding my daughter through the worst day of our lives. My mother and sister were sipping cocktails on a beach. I felt something inside me snap. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that. Not just sadness, though it weighed on me like a lead blanket. It was the cold, hard realization that I had wasted years giving everything to people who had never given a single thing in return. And I was done. For the first time in my life. I wasn't going to be the one who called first. I wasn't going to be the one who fixed things. Who forgave without an apology. Who kept handing over my love and support like it was something they deserved. Rather than something they should have earned. I turned my phone off and set it down. Then I went upstairs, lay down beside my daughter, and let myself cry, not just for Kevin, but for the years I had spent believing that my family would ever be anything more than what they had just proven themselves to be. A few days later, the phone rang again. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then my sister. Ignored. Then my brother, who rarely called me at all. I already knew why. They wanted something. And this time, they weren't going to get it. A few days after my mother's unexpected visit, my phone started buzzing with messages. At first, I ignored them, assuming it was just another attempt to guilt trip me. But as they kept coming, my curiosity got the better of me. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the notifications. Mariella's name appeared first. Her words were laced with irritation, wrapped in a thin veil of forced affection. "I don't understand why you're acting like this. We're your family. We love you." I scoffed, shaking my head. Family? Love? They had abandoned me in the moment I needed them most. Had chosen sunshine and cocktails over standing beside me as I buried my husband. Now, suddenly, they were concerned? Then there was Alex. His message was shorter, but just as condescending. "Mom is really hurt. Can you at least call her? You're being kind of selfish." Selfish. The word struck me, not because it was true, but because it was so deeply ironic. Hadn't I spent my whole life putting their needs before my own? Hadn't I given without hesitation every time they reached out for help? And yet, the one time I chose to prioritize myself, to set a boundary, I was the selfish one. The next message was from my mother. "I can't believe you're turning your back on us. After everything I've done for you." I stared at the words, feeling a mix of disbelief and cold amusement. Everything she had done for me? Did she mean the years of treating me like an afterthought? The way she had lavished praise and affection on Mariella and Alex while expecting me to fend for myself? Did she mean the way she had ignored my grief, abandoned me at my lowest point, and now had the audacity to act like I was the one in the wrong? I put the phone down, exhaling slowly. I was done letting them twist reality to fit their narrative. I was done feeling guilty for expecting the bare minimum of decency. Then, as if on cue, another message came in. "Linda, I need some help this month. Things are tight, and the bills are piling up. Can you send something?" There it was. The real reason behind all of this. Not an apology, not a moment of reflection. Just another demand, another expectation that I would keep playing my role as the dependable one. The one they could always count on to fix things. I felt a strange sense of clarity settle over me. For years, I had been their safety net, their backup plan, even when it strained my own finances. Even when it meant cutting corners for my own family. I had given without question. But Kevin was gone now. And with his absence came the undeniable truth. I owed them nothing. I took a deep breath, steadied my hands, and typed out a single sentence. I'm not sending you any more money. I hit send and waited. Less than a minute later, my phone rang. My mother's name flashed across the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then came another message. Linda, please. Just this once. And another. This is really cruel. Linda, you know we depend on your support. I turned my phone face down on the table, letting out a slow breath. The guilt that used to grip me in moments like these was gone. In its place was a quiet certainty, a firm understanding that for the first time in my life, I was choosing myself. They could beg, they could plead, they could call me selfish. It didn't matter anymore. I had finally drawn the line. And this time, there was no going back. The silence that followed was unexpected. For years, I had been conditioned to anticipate their persistence, to hear my phone buzz endlessly, to read messages dripping with guilt, to listen to my mother's exasperated sighs as she reminded me of everything she had done for me. But after I ignored that last message, after I made it clear there would be no more money, no more sacrifices, no more unquestioning obedience, everything went quiet. At first, I thought it was a temporary retreat, a strategy to make me anxious, to make me question myself. But days turned into weeks, and the silence stretched on. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. I stopped waking up with a knot of dread in my stomach. I stopped checking my phone, expecting another demand. The weight on my shoulders, the invisible burden I had carried for so long, began to lift. I started focusing on my own life. On Clara. Winter melted into spring, and with it, I felt something inside me thaw as well. One evening, I sat on the couch with Clara as she doodled in her notebook, her tiny fingers gripping a purple crayon. I watched her, realizing how much lighter she seemed, how much lighter our home felt. Mommy? She asked, glancing up at me with her big, curious eyes. Yes, baby? She hesitated, then said, Are we happy now? The question caught me off guard. Had we been unhappy before? Or had she simply sensed, in her innocent way, the tension I had carried for so long? I smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Yes, sweetheart, I said, meaning every word. We're happy now. A few months later, an unexpected letter arrived in the mail. It was from Kevin's lawyer. At first, I thought it was another piece of paperwork related to his passing. Another bureaucratic process I would have to wade through. But as I read the letter, my hands started to tremble. Kevin had bought a house. Not just any house, a cottage on the coast of North Carolina, tucked away near the Outer Banks. The deed was in my name. I sat down hard in the chair, the air stolen from my lungs. He had done this for me. For us. I could almost hear his voice. That gentle steadiness he always carried. Lindy, you work too hard. One day, you're going to need a place to just be. Tears blurred my vision. He had been planning this. He had wanted me to have an escape. A place untouched by the demands of anyone else. I knew, in that moment, what I had to do. A month later, Clara and I packed up our things and moved into the cottage. The first night, I stood on the small wooden deck, listening to the waves crash against the shore. The salty breeze tangled in my hair. The stars stretched endlessly above me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. My mother, my sister, and my brother didn't know where I had gone. I had changed my number. I had severed the last remaining ties. I heard through distant relatives that things weren't going well for them. Without my financial support, they had struggled. My mother's bills piled up. Mariella's TV career started fading, her audience growing smaller by the month. Alex had burned through what little savings he had. But I felt nothing. No guilt, no anger, No satisfaction. Just peace. One afternoon, as Clara and I walked along the beach, she picked up a stick and began writing in the sand. Mom plus me equals home. I swallowed the lump in my throat and pulled her close, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Yes, this was home. No longer burdened by expectations. No longer shackled to people who never truly loved me. I had chosen myself. And for the first time in my life, that choice felt like freedom. This story is about choosing yourself. About recognizing when a relationship, even with family, is only taking from you and never giving back. Linda spent years sacrificing, hoping for love and support in return, only to be abandoned in her darkest moment. But instead of letting that break her, she found strength. She let go, moved forward, and built a life where she and her daughter were truly free. What do you think? Comment 2 if you liked the story, or 7 if you didn't, and if you've ever had to walk away from a toxic relationship. Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this. Your support helps keep these stories alive.